Hi everyone, once again. We are back at GDG DevFest Ukraine 2017. Right now, I have Marcos Placona, developer evangelist at Twilio with me here, and we'll have an interview. So, first of all, let me start with my story with Twilio, because I never heard of Twilio until 2013.
Okay.
I was at the conference in London. It was Apps World London in 2013. I was tired, and I was going back home. It was like 5 minutes, 5 last minutes of the conference.
Yeah.
There was this guy
that time when you're like, or is he like just dying to go home?
Yeah, no more technology for me. I don't want to hear anything. And the guy in the red t-shirt, he just stopped me I'll show you a demo. Man, I don't want to hear anything. He's like, no. You should definitely hear this demo, just live coding, real life demo, which kind of can break sometimes. And he got my attention, and we started writing. He started writing some code in Ruby, doing this curl requests, and my phone rang. Tell us more about. Probably he was from developer relations team.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
So we have this thing at Twilio, which is. We like to empower and we like to inspire developers on the first 5 minutes. So we have this thing that is called the 5-minute demo. And the 5
You still do those? You have a special name for it?
Yeah, we still totally do those, and they're called the 5-minute demo. And the 5-minute demo is basically we have a narrative, we have a story where we're going to tell you about how Twilio works. We're going to explain to you how you can send a text message to a number. So we'll show you how to get a number. You send the text message to it, and then you're gonna get a call back. And then when you get this call back, we do it. Usually, I don't know how yours ended, but it usually ends in 2 ways. Either you get a call back, and we play something like Star Wars, like a Star Wars song to you, or if we have a bunch of people, we just put them all in a big conference call so they can talk to each other. So I don't know which experience you had. And usually,
yeah, it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But usually we do this because we want people to have an experience with us in the first 5 minutes. And you still remember it, so it sounds like we did a good job because it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and you still remember their experience. So it sounds like we did well.
Okay, yeah, thanks. What I had? Okay, so your session here was called "I Just Hacked Your App."
Yep.
And what was it about?
Cool.
How to hack an app or what?
So my intent with this session is not to show developers how they can hack applications. I'm not trying to create hackers here, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show developers that their applications can be hacked, and it's very easy for applications to be hacked unless they take all the necessary precautions, okay? So I talk about some of the hacks that I've been able to do in some applications. I don't like naming anything, so I don't name any of the applications, but I show them some real hacks. I show them some real life hacks, and those hacks are all on a mock application I have that is very similar to some other applications you may have seen out there. But obviously I don't name any names. I try and make sure that people understand that as a developer, it's their responsibility to make sure that their applications is secure. Because it's not down to anyone else. It's not down to any, if you have a security team, for example, inside your company, it's not down to them to make sure that your application is secure. It's down to you as a developer to build as many layers of security as you can to make sure that your application is secure. And this is what the session was about. So I start off by wearing a mask in the beginning, where I'm actually live hacking an application. So I hack an application in front of them, so they get this first sort of experience of what hacking is like. And obviously, when you hack, you wear a mask, right?
Yeah, the room is dark and the terminal is just
exactly all those matrices going on. When you hack, you wear a mask. So I start by just hacking an application, and people get this first experience of how easy it is, because this is me hacking an application in about a minute and a half. So it doesn't even take me very long. As long as you have the right tools, you can do it. And I also encourage developers to go and hack their own applications, because you only learn when you find out what vulnerabilities your application has. So this is the premise of it. And it's really cool. And I really enjoy giving this talk. Like, I really have a good time when I do it. So I'm very passionate about it.
Okay, like for what are the I don't know top 3 things people should check in 15 minutes
Sure.
to make their code better?
So the first one I say is never have any passwords inside your application. Okay, and I know
Don't hard code strings.
I know, yeah, and I know this sounds like really, like it's obvious, but it's really not. Like whenever I decompile an application, I always find some very interesting things. And usually what I do is I just get in contact with the developers and I say, hey, I found this in your application, you might want to remove it. And I always point them to some article I wrote or something to tell them how to do it. So passwords inside an application, big no-no, happens a lot. If you are going to have passwords inside your application for whatever reason, make sure it's all encrypted, okay? Don't make it easy for hackers. Don't make it easy for someone else to just get that information and use it. So encrypt as much as you can. If you need to have anything inside of it, make sure you encrypt it. And I'd say probably the third one is, well, obviously, don't have those things in your application, okay? But I'd say the third one is, if you are making HTTP requests from your application, like if you're using APIs, we all use APIs inside our apps, make sure you use SSL. Make sure you use an SSL certificate and make sure that you're making connections in a secure way, because not having an SSL certificate means that's now much easier for someone to just like literally sniff your traffic and see what's going on. And this is all plain text, okay? So you don't even need to be a super hacker with a mask to be able to find those things. It's plain text. Anyone can read.
Actually, like you mentioned HTTPS and secure APIs, I remember reading in your bio that you believe in APIs because they bring peace in software engineering world. What do you mean by that?
I am a big lover of APIs, okay? And I have worked in very distributed teams where we had people everywhere. I do work in a distributed team right now, but I used to work in software engineering teams where we had people everywhere. And when you're all working on the same product, it becomes a mess. So the way we solved it with like distributed teams across like different countries and time zones was, let's just build things as APIs. Let's just have different APIs for certain things. And then you can have your front-end application, for example, just making those requests to the APIs. So I think they bring peace because like they avoid all of the like the heartbreaking situations where you make a change to something or you make a change to a project and you break it for everyone else. It now works for you, but it's broken for everyone else. So, you know, having good APIs, having good API standards as well, it's important. And making sure that your code is well versioned. And yeah, I think this is why
like that's an interesting point here because the problem is that like that I see or faced. First, developers don't want to write specs.
No, because we're developers. Like we write code, not specs.
And like that's. And the second problem is that you have to keep those specs, even they are written up to date. How did you, I know, fix those two things?
Through generation. I use a lot of generation. I use a lot of, as much as I can automate in this process. So if you're like a Java developer, for example, you can use Java docs, and there's going to be something like this in every single language. And I know, like, as a Java developer, you might say, yeah, but Java docs, they just look horrible. But there are tools that you can use to actually improve this. There are things you can do, even if you need to write a little bit more code to automate this. There are things you can do to make it look good. So I don't think developers should spend any time writing, like, API documentation from scratch. I think they should generate as much as they can, and once it gets generated, you can always transform it somehow. So you can always turn an ugly generated Java doc into something that actually looks good. This will massively improve your entire process, and it will make sure developers are actually not frustrated with the whole thing like, oh, I love writing new functionalities, but I hate writing documentation. I don't like doing that either, okay? Also, if you can have someone to do that documentation for you, if you can have someone who actually thinks about usability in documentation, that's fantastic. We happen to have this in our team, and our documentation went from developers documentation, like a developer written documentation, which is not great, to a documentation that looks amazing and everyone loves.
Okay. Uh, how do you fit documentation into the whole engineering process, which is obviously not just engineering, it's like UX process, developer process, I know, product testing process. How do you make sure that the information stays in the, can you make sure that information is in the, there is one single source of truth and that it's updated by all teams?
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
I don't
It's
think
like very
I don't
complicated.
think anything I say here will be like the silver bullets. Like just
Yeah.
follow this and you're gonna get this amazing documentation.
There is not.
So one thing we try to do at Twilio is we try in our engineering teams, we try and make sure we have a lot of small teams.
Okay.
And we have a lot of small teams who are responsible and they know 100% of this one thing, okay? So we have a messaging team, for example, we have like an SMS team, we have a voice team, and all these people work with is voice. That's not to say they can't change teams, it's fine, they can always move teams. But we like to make sure we have teams who are like specialists in that specific product. And this team goes from having software engineers to products managers to QA to people writing documentation.
Like cross-functional.
Yeah, so it's a cross-functional team, but they're really specialists on that product. So any questions you have about these specific products, you go and you ask that team, and they will know it because they built the product, they work, they do maintenance, they fix bugs on it, and this works really well for us. Like just having small teams, like a bunch of small teams that focus. And sometimes you will have a product that is massive. Sometimes it happens, like you have a product with a bunch of functionalities. But there's always a way for you to break down and have people who specialize in this certain functionality in that specific product.
Okay, yeah, thanks. One of the, like my personal experience, which I faced, was that like when developers can do can resolve customer requests, it gives instant feedback to developers. And the contrarian thing I like went through was that once you let developers participate in the customer feedback process, as a result, over time, they build better software because they are like the people who are communicating with the end users.
Yeah, I truly believe in this because I've been a software engineer for many years.
Yeah.
And as a software engineer, it's very easy for you to just live inside this bubble where you're building software, you're not looking anywhere, you're just building your software, you're just trying to make sure that you can do it as best as you can, but you're not looking at any of the sides. You know, even when you're doing unit tests, for example, it's very easy for you to miss edge cases. And yes, having customers giving feedback and having developers actually giving developers access to this feedback is really important. However, there's a flip side to it because you can't, like, in my opinion, I don't think it's very healthy to have developers completely like involved with the customer all the time, because ultimately developers want to write code. Okay, and if it now turns out that these developers, out of their 40 hours a week they do, if it now turns out that 10 of these 40 hours they're going to be in meetings with customers, that's not productive anymore. But giving access to this is really cool. And again, especially for things like bugs, for example, giving access to developers to see a bug reporting tool that comes from the customers is really interesting because customers will have a different perspective, okay? Customers are usually users. And users will have because
like
the only
regular
person,
people.
Yeah, so the only person who's actually going to break your application is not QA, it's the user. Because QA can only go so far to find like a vulnerability or to find a bug. But the user's going to find a bug. The users, and I don't blame the user. The user's trying to do something.
Yeah.
And they will find the bug. They're the ones who are going to type weird symbol instead. They're the ones who are going to type like a weird symbol at an email field, for example. And, granted, this is a simple example, and QA should probably pick this up. But they're the ones who are going to break it. So it's important to that this interface exists. I just think it's also important to be careful with how much time of the developer goes into like being
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, yeah. So they are not like overwhelmed and
Yeah.
just resolving stuff
Yeah.
as it hurts. Yeah,
Yeah.
true. I also read in your bio that you're a GDE at Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Like obviously people know what's Internet of Things, and we have actually around 12 GDEs here, from what I heard.
Okay.
Can't remember the exact name. How can I get into GDE program? What's that? Maybe.
So GDE is the Google Developer Expert. You're not you don't work for Google in any way, but you get this kind of like status.
Okay.
So it's the cool thing, the most interesting thing about being a GDE for me is you actually get access to people I wouldn't normally get access to.
Okay.
This is like, you can get access to the people who are building the products that you're using. So in the case of like IoT, for example, I have been playing with Android things. I've been using Android things for a while. And for me, it's important to say, hey, I can actually talk to the developer who built this API interface, and I can ask them questions. So it's about getting access to these people, and also about getting access to all the other GDEs. Because now, you have this network, and
yeah, true.
it's very common that you will come through issues that they came through at some point.
Okay.
So you now have this network that you can talk to people. Becoming a GDE is not, I don't think it's super hard. So what you need to do is you need to get nominated by someone.
Okay.
So one of the GDEs will nominate you. Once you get a nomination, you will, if you're successful, like if everything goes okay, they will ask you for a what they call community CV.
Okay.
So you will find that most GDEs are people who they regularly speak at conferences, they regularly write blog posts, they work in open source, they usually go to meetups. So those are people who
Engage in community.
They're community people.
Yeah.
So they engage with the community. So you will submit this information to Google. Google will then just like appraise it. They'll just go through it. Then you're going to get interviewed by another GDE. So there's going to be another Google Developer Expert who will interview you.
Okay.
And that's going to be an interview for the specific technology that you are applying for. So if you're applying for Android, you're going to be interviewed for Android. IoT, you're going to be interviewed for IoT. Then you go through that, and you're going to get yet another interview. But that's the last one, I promise. You're going to get interviewed by a Googler. So that's the point when usually the developer advocate for that specific technology, they're going to want to talk to you. And they, like, the questions are going to be related to what you do. So it shouldn't be very, like, if you work in that domain, it shouldn't be very hard for you to answer the questions. And all going okay, you become a GDE. So you get put on the website, and now you get access to all these things I told you about. So this is the process. And it takes some time to go through the process, because like imagine finding someone to do your first interview, then finding someone to do your second interview.
It can take time.
It can take some time, but it's not anything, you're still living your life in this process. Like, it's not like you're waiting around or anything. And like I said, this is not a job, you don't get paid for it, so it's not like a job interview, for example.
It's more like community-driven.
Yeah,
stuff.
very much community-driven.
Cool.
So it's very much about people who are passionate about community and passionate about their specific community.
Okay. Thank you, Marcos. Let's wrap it up.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone over there, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.